Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Brittany Bodane, and I am Golden Software's webinar coordinator. I'm excited to be here today to teach you everything you need to know about creating well construction logs in Strater. Today, we'll talk about how to import and format data for well construction tables, how to create a well construction log in the borehole view and cross-section view with both one well and multiple wells in one log. We'll also discuss creating well construction fill schemes and cover some common pitfalls along the way. After the discussion of each topic, I will stop for a few minutes to answer any questions. You can send your questions to Drew, the webinar host, via the questions box at any time. The questions box is on the webinar control panel underneath the audio section. Type in your question and it will be sent to the webinar host, who will either answer it or forward it to me. Please feel free to send in all of your questions. If we don't have time to answer them during the webinar, we will answer them via email once the webinar is complete. This webinar is also being recorded. Later this week, I will post the recording along with the data used in the webinar, and I'll send each of you a link to this when it is posted so you can test these examples out yourself. Okay, so let's get started. A well construction log, as we see on the right side here, is a visual representation of the well. It replicates a well construction diagram and is used in many industries such as environmental, oil and gas, water involving industries, of course. The well construction log shows how the monitoring well or piezometer was created and displays items such as screen, packing material, end caps, covers. The data for each part of the well are listed in the data table with specific information. The well construction can display detailed representations of one or many wells. The example we're looking at right now, of course, has 3 wells. Let's talk about the data requirements for a well construction log. This is a well construction table fully populated with the information to create the well we were just looking at. Here we can look at our well side by side. I'll make it a little bit bigger for you guys here. The well construction logs require a special type of interval data table called a well construction table. In this data table, there are 7 required columns. The required columns are hole ID, from, to, outer diameter, inner diameter, offset, and item. These data interact with the well construction scheme to produce the log. So let's talk about what these columns mean. The first column, the hole ID, tells Strater which well or borehole the data refers to. In the data table, you can enter the well construction items for multiple hole IDs, then create separate well construction logs for each hole ID. We'll take a look at an example of this in our second example today. Or, as we see it for our example now, we can use one hole ID and display many wells in one log. Our first common pitfall we'll mention today is regarding the hole IDs. This is true for Strater in general and is one of the most common issues we find with users using Strater as a whole. And it's that the hole ID is very important. It needs to be exactly the same throughout your data. So for example, if our hole ID we see here is MW-1, if we had another table that also referred to this borehole and we left out the dash and there was a space or even no space there, Strater wouldn't be able to recognize those as the same hole ID because they're not identical. So just make sure that you are consistently using the same exact hole ID for each hole ID you use. The next columns are the from and to columns. And these specify the vertical depth interval to display the item. The outer diameter and inner diameter columns tell Strater the width of the item. Imagine a line down the center of our well diagram. This center line is 0. You can tell Strater how thick to draw the item on both sides of this zero line. So for example, if we take a look at our first row of data, our inner diameter is 19 and our outer diameter is 29. Strater will display this item 19 units to the right of the center line and 19 units to the left of the center line. And the same goes for the outer diameter. So as we can see here, this is our concrete according to our legend. So what we're seeing here is the concrete being drawn from 19 units to 29 units, 19 units to 29 units. The offset specifies the horizontal offset for a particular item. It shifts the center line for that item from the default of 0 to the new value. Offset is typically used if you have more than one wells in your well construction log, as we do now. We can see here all of these items that have a -5 offset are going to be the items we see shifted to the left. A negative offset shifts the item to the left, and a positive offset, like we see down here, shifts items to the right. These items now have a center line of 5, meaning the center of this well follows an imaginary straight line down 5 units across the well. The item, which we've brought up a little already, this item gives Strater a keyword for the particular log item, or object if you prefer. This could be a simple name of what the item is, such as we see here, concrete, well cover, or casing. The item keyword is used in the well construction scheme to apply the fill and line properties to that item when the well construction log is drawn. And we'll cover how to do that in a little bit. Some other important information to note about how to format your data is it's very important that you list the larger items that go in the background first in the table. For example, back to our concrete. This concrete is actually is being drawn from here to here and here to here. And as we can see, this object lays on top of the concrete. If this casing wasn't listed after we listed the concrete, it would show up behind the concrete and we wouldn't be able to see this black line here. It would stop as soon as this concrete starts. So it's very important to keep in mind that Strater is going to draw the objects in the order they're listed in the table, starting with the first item first. So smaller items that need to go on top, such as these that actually make up the well that extends down past our silica sand, are listed last in the order. And that'll be our second pitfall. If you are not able to see an object in your well construction, making sure it's listed in the appropriate order in your table is going to be a great place to start. The next place to start, if you can't see your item, is to make sure that none of your from to values overlap each other. And then make sure none of your outer and inner diameters are overlapping each other. If your inner diameter is bigger than your outer diameter or the same size, you won't be able to see that object. So it's another common issue we see is overlap in the from to and outer diameter and inner diameter. Next, we'll talk about how we can bring our data into Strater. But first, I wanted to see if we had any questions about how to format our data. Okay, great. We have one question. Thank you so much for sending that in. If anyone has any questions throughout the webinar, please send them in whenever you think of them. So our first question here is, are the keywords used in the item column set words in Strater, or can they be whatever I want them to be? That's a great question. These can be whatever you want them to be, and it'll make a little bit more sense when we are making our scheme. But Strater is going to look at the words in your item column and allow you to make a scheme with whatever words you put there. So of course, these are probably very industry standard terms, but you could use whatever you want. You could even have it be A, B, C, D. Doesn't matter to Strater as long as you know what it means. You can make a scheme with it. Okay, it looks like those are all of our questions. So let's move on to talk about if we needed to import the data rather than just having it magically appear as it is now. And then we'll also move on to actually creating the well construction log. So first, I'll show you how to create a new table. I understand that it can be often to just receive a hand-drawn diagram of your well, so you might need to start with an empty table. We could create a brand new well construction table by clicking Home in the ribbon, New Table. We'd give our table a name, and then the most important part here is to change our base table type to the well construction table. And you'll notice the column list is going to update when I click this. So you don't have to remember the required columns. If you're using a well construction table, Strater will automatically populate them. Now, some of you might be asking what you would do if your wells are deviated. And in that case, you would add some columns here to show your deviation. And that would be azimuth and dip would be what you need to show that deviation there. Once you're done getting the table set up, you just click Create. And now we have an empty table, and all of the columns we asked for are listed at the top here. That means they'll be selectable in other views in Strater. So now we could just simply go about entering our data, which I won't have you do. I think we all know how to type into the worksheet, but you would just make sure to keep in mind that your items that go in the background, such as your filling, and all of that would be listed first. If you already had your data in a table, whether that be an XLSX or a CSV, you could simply create the well construction log. Or if you needed to edit it before you created the well construction log, you can bring your table in and tell Strater it's a well construction table using File, Open. And then once we have selected our table, we click Open, and Strater will give us the option to make sure our column headers are being read correctly. All of the rows we want are included. Click Next. And here it already detected it would be a well construction based on the data and the naming we've been using, so we wouldn't need to change anything. Here again, if we had inclination azimuth for a deviated well, we could select our columns. I don't have that. Then we'd click Finish, and it would look like our table we had open already. I'll click Cancel so we don't have too many tables with the same name in here. So getting your data in is pretty easy. I understand sometimes LAS files can contain some well construction information. You would need to reformat that LAS file to be in this format for Strater, where it can see the whole ID, from to, outer, inner, offset, item. And so you'd have to kind of reformat that LAS file in order to bring it in and use for the well construction. Okay, now let's move on to the fun part of actually creating our well construction log. So to do this, we can create a new borehole view. I'll click Home, New, Borehole View. And now to create our log, all we need to do is click Log in the ribbon, Create Log, Well Construction. We can click anywhere in the borehole view. You can move it afterwards, so I'll click. And as soon as I do, Strater is prompting us for data. Here we can see if I hadn't opened the table at all, I could go ahead and open it. But since it's open, we will go ahead and select it from our open tables here. Now we are recreating this well, and you'll notice it is not looking like that well right now. It's kind of cut off on the sides here. And of course, we will need to apply the fill using the scheme as I mentioned before. The reason it's cut off on the sides is because Strater uses a default well size of 10. However, in this case, we set our largest outer diameter to a value of 29. And we can see that here. This is our largest diameter, also why it's listed first on our table. So we can make the width of our well match our widest width by selecting the well construction. And on the log tab in the property manager, I'll change the well size to 29. And now we can see everything we need to see here. Next, we can go about making our well construction scheme and filling everything in. Also on the data tab is where the well construction scheme is set. Strater went ahead and assigned a scheme for us. Now all we have to do is tell Strater what we want that scheme to be filled with. So I'll click Home, Display, Scheme Editor. Because I have a couple tables in here, we have a couple schemes available. This is the scheme that our data is assigned to. So to see all of our items, I'll click the plus button. Now we can see all of the words that were listed in our item column. So if I select bottom cap, I can just go ahead and start filling it in. I want the fill style to be solid, and I just want it to be 100% black. I could keep moving through to my items, or if I wanted to see what I've done, I can click apply. You can see here I've added some black. The casing I also want to be black. Pretty simple here. Once I change that solid, I could change the color if I wanted, but I'll leave it, fill those in as black. And then we continue down our list and fill everything in. Again, I think you guys know how to change properties, so I won't make you watch me go through all of these. Instead, I created a scheme already, so we could just auto-fill these. You can create schemes, save them, reuse them on any project you want. So if you're often creating even the same well construction, or you're always going to have the same keywords and the same fill for them, you can create your scheme and then at the bottom of the dialog here, click Save Scheme. When you want to use it later, you can click Open Scheme. And this is really handy. You can create a huge scheme that includes all of the keywords you might ever want to use and use that scheme for everything you create. Even if you don't use those items in what you're applying the scheme to, they won't show up and it won't mess anything up in Strater. Strater just will ignore them. So you can create a master scheme and apply it to everything you use, save yourself some steps each time you create a log, or even cross sections and lithology logs, really anything the scheme can be applied to. So I'm going to select this scheme, which as I click down, we can see I've filled everything in nicely. So we'll click this and we'll click apply. It doesn't change anything because we have to actually set it down here. So I'll click OK to get out of our scheme, and then I'll simply just select the well construct item scheme. Now we can see it looks like we were expecting it to from our original image. So next, some useful things to add here would be a depth log, perhaps a legend. So let's go ahead and add a depth log. We'll do that by clicking log in the ribbon, create log depth. And again, I'll just click wherever I'd like it in our view. The depth log is very editable here. We can change any of these options we see on this log tab, such as our units, orientation, overall depth, to make it match everything else in our project. Of course, we only have this, but normally you would have a well construction along with other data, as I'm sure you're aware. We can change our tick marks, change our scaling if we don't care for the automatic scaling, labels, plenty of options in here. If we had decimal digits, we could change our label formatting, date time, line fill. We can add a legend also on the log tab in the ribbon. Log, add, legend. And again, we'll just click where we'd like it. We stay in legend mode, so to exit legend mode, click the legend button again or press escape on your keyboard. When we select the legend, we can, actually, I think I had the wrong thing selected here. Let's get our legend one more time. There we go. So what happened there is I didn't have the right item selected for our legend, which is why we weren't seeing the legend for the item. So I'll press escape one more time, select our legend we don't want, and I'll press delete. And now we have a legend showing all of our items that we need. So the legend too is very customizable. On the legend tab, we see omit unused items. This will allow you to have a master scheme with every keyword you need, but not show it on your legend. So you'll only see what's used here. We could change the number of columns. Really switch anything we want about this if we wanted it on the right side or the left here. Labels are completely formatable here. Change our title if we don't want it. And again, fill, outline, everything to make your project look professional the way you'd like it. So that is about how useful, or sorry, reading a user question that just came in here. That is how you create a construction log in the borehole view. Next, we'll look at creating the cross-section and adding a construction log to it. But first, I wanted to see if we had any questions about what we've covered so far. And we do have a question, could we get the final file just as an example for future uses? And the answer is you actually already have this final file. It is a sample file for Strater that came along with it. It is named Well Construction 1, so I can show you where that is. By default, the samples are downloaded to your C drive, and you'll go into Program Files, Golden Software, Strater, Samples folder, and the well we've been recreating is in this file, Well Construction 1, SDG. And of course, I will email all of you a link with the recording, and that recording will have the files that we've been working with too, so you'll get this file again. But in the meantime, we are working with Well Construction 1 SDG. Thank you for your question. Please send any more you have. We have another question. Can you add a depth and an elevation log? Certainly. We could do that very easily by clicking log, create log, depth, and adding another depth log. Or one of my favorite things to do in Strater is just to copy paste. So I can press Control-C, Control-V, place it. It's really handy to do if we had made any changes to this depth log, such as the formatting of the labels that we wanted to be identical on this one. Great to just copy paste it. All those properties that we changed would be there. And then all we have to do is go in to the log tab in the property manager and change our orientation to elevation. Okay, and then another question. What does the screen scale setting do. Okay, so that is if we select our construction log here, we're talking about the screen scale down at the bottom. And that's a great question. The screen scale setting is specifically for screen items. It controls the scaling, offset, and size of the pattern. The screen scale varies between 0.1 and 2 inches, or for those who work in centimeters, that's 0.254 and 5.08 centimeters. For small wells, for example, if the well construction log was only 6 inches or so long, the screen scale may require a smaller scale setting of around 0.5 inches to show enough lines for the screen zone. For a larger well construction, a value of 1 or higher might be necessary, so the lines are separate. So we can take a look at that, and these are our screens. So take a look at these lines, and I'm going to change this setting here from 1 to 0.55. You can see those lines increased, and it does look better when we do that. It looks a little bit more accurate for what my screen really looks like here. Okay, and that looks like all the time for questions we have today. If you sent in a question and we didn't get to it, thank you so much. We will get back to you via email. So I'm going to move on to showing how to add a construction log to a cross section. For this, we have a different file. And if you're, this is also a sample file that I simplified. This sample file is actually the log type sample file, if you're curious. It includes this cross section already and in a well construction table. So I will send you this file simplified like this again, but in the meantime, if you'd like to look, it is sample file log types. So here we have our cross section, and Strater won't embed the well construction log in the cross section, so you will need to make your cross section as normal before you get to the well construction portion. If you aren't familiar with creating cross sections and you want to be, we have plenty of information on our support portal, including training videos, written how-tos, and Strater's help is also useful, so give a look there. Feel free to reach out to support if you need help with your cross sections. But for the webinar, we'll just move on to the well construction portion. For this, we are going to add a well construction log for DH1 and DH2. I have the information for each well in one table, so we'll take a look at that now. We'll see here the two names are listed. And because we are just going to create a well construction log and change the borehole associated with it, you'll notice that the fill for each is listed with the rest of the information for that well particularly. The order that you want to list these in, you can pretty much think of these as if they were different tables. So you can start over with the items that need to go in the background for each hole ID. Then adding the construction to the cross section is the same steps as in the borehole view. We'll just click log, create log, well construction. And we could try very carefully to manually place this right over DH1, but I'm going to show you a trick so that Strater will locate everything for us. So it really doesn't matter where I'm placing this on my cross section. So I'll just click, and we'll open our well construction table from our open tables list. And again, here is our well construction. We can double check that our screen size is big enough. It is. We could make it 8 if we wanted, or we could leave it as 10. Let's go ahead and make it 8. So now we can apply a fill. And same thing, I have just created one for us here. It's the same scheme I used before because I have the same keywords in this table. So now we have our well construction for DH1. Now again, I'm going to use copy paste because I'm going to use the same scheme, so I can just very easily press Control-C, Control-V, choose where to paste. And all I have to do is, on the Log tab in the Property Manager, is change my hole ID filter. Strater will automatically place them where they should be on our depth log here. If I want to, for my own clarity, I can rename this. I just kind of long clicked on that, or you can right click and rename. And now that we have these placed here, we'll get Strater to automatically line up all of our objects based on their hole ID. This will also move our depth log. Our depth log, if I select it, we can see on the Log tab in the Property Manager, its hole ID filter is DH1. So it will get moved in this next step, but we'll just move it right back. So we'll click Log, Display, Overlay Logs. Strater moves everything where it should be. We'll select our depth log and just move it back. And now everything is manually lined, or excuse me, not manually lined up according to its hole ID, so you know it is exact. And that is as easy as it is to create well constructions over your cross section. So please feel free to send in any questions. That does conclude the example portion of the webinar today. And while you're sending in all of your questions, we'll just go over a quick recap of our common pitfalls we find. So of course, inconsistent hole IDs. Make sure your hole IDs are identical across all your data tables. If anything is going wrong and you can't see an item in your well construction or even a cross section, double check your overlapping from to values. For a well construction specifically, double check your overlapping inner outer diameters if you're having trouble seeing an item. And then of course, the items in the background should be listed first in the well construction table. Okay, so those are it for our common pitfalls today. What questions can I ask for anyone? Is it possible to rename the depth log such that when you choose overlay logs, the depth log does not move? Good question, thank you. No, it's not possible, and that's because we'll go back to our example here. It's not the naming of the log that is making it move. It's the hole ID filter it's associated with. And for the depth log to show the depth of your data you're working with, it will need a hole ID filter to be assigned to it. It is possible. I haven't tried. Here that we could try. Nope. But we can add your vote for the ability to keep it in place so it doesn't move. And we do have your name and email, so we'll get that added for you. Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions I can answer? Okay, well, I'm not seeing any new questions coming in. If you are typing something, definitely send it in to us. We'd be happy to help. Otherwise, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. We really appreciate it. Hope everyone learned something new. And as always, this session's been recorded and will be posted on our support portal by the end of the week. Watch your emails for the link to the recording as well as the data so you can follow along at your own pace. If anyone has any questions after the webinar concludes, please feel free to reach out to our support team, stratersupport@goldensoftware.com. We are happy to help. Thanks again. Have a great day.